I would like to talk today a little bit about Abraham, like turn back to the Old Testament again and share some thoughts and actually a technique on how to look at the Bible. We call it metaphysical interpretation, and that's a $3 phrase, I know, but it just means that we don't take the stories literally, although some we do. I mean, you can. But in the case of Abraham, there are no specific dates known about when Abraham lived, or if he lived at all. He may be a literary figure that is used, to tell a story, and that is the story of the development of Israel and the story of the development of the Hebrew faith. But it goes back a long ways. We know that. But I'm going to just share a line with you here, and you may be amazed at how much we can get out of this one line, and how much of it actually applies to probably whatever you're going through at this moment in your life. It's real easy to read these things and let it just go by. Think of, okay, this is about Abraham. In this case, Abram, before his name changed, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But this one line says, "Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you." We're all familiar with this. It's Abram's call. And what we can easily do is just read that and go on to the next line, to the next aspect of the story, if we're interested in reading it at all. A metaphysical interpretation of Scripture it might be easier to understand as a spiritual interpretation. All the characters of the Bible, we can look at them and the way they move in the story, the meaning of their names, the action, that is depicted in this case. Abram's called to go from your country, leave where you live, leave your family, and go to a place that I will show you. So there's some action there, and it's talking about going from a point A to point B. And there's a lot more to this story than meets the eye. Because for Abram to leave, he's leaving his father Terah. And Terah was polytheistic. He worshipped many gods. And all of the ancient Hebrew culture worshipped many gods. But Abram is being called by one God. So this is a pretty big deal. It's like, okay, Abram, leave this idea that there are many powers and go to a place where you can start over. Start your thinking anew. There aren't many gods, there's but one God. And that voice that you are hearing is that one God. So Abram represents the beginning of monotheism, or the worship of a single God idea. He wasn't the first. I ran across another fellow, Akhenaten. I wish his name was Bill, but it's not. He was an Egyptian pharaoh who practiced monotheism, but his single god was the sun disk. It was the sun. And he actually created a real problem, and this was like around 1300 BC or somewhere in that era. They believe he was King Tut's father. But he decided to stop worshiping many gods, as all the Egyptians had forever, and after he left they went back to it. But he decided that the religion would worship one God, and that would be the sun. And he actually moved the capital of Egypt out into the desert, built another city, made that the capital. And he started a campaign to eradicate all polytheism, all worship of more than the one God. And he was absolutely hated, so much so that scholars didn't even know he existed, didn't even know he was alive, was one of the pharaohs. He was taken off the list of who's who among pharaohs. And I mean literally, all the statues that have been discovered about this fellow are busted up. And the Egyptian belief was that the soul actually inhabited the statues that were created for them and of them, of their image. And so his fellow Egyptians hated him so much that they tried to eradicate him completely from history. And it's only been, not all that long ago that he was rediscovered. And actually his mummy was discovered, and they did a DNA test. That's how they linked him to King Tut. But what I'm saying here is what he did was extremely unpopular. He went from a multiple God idea, which was the standard way of thinking, to a single God idea. And it's not the kind of God we're thinking of necessarily, but it's the same idea. It's a total cultural shift, and he tried to force that. In the case of Abram, he's not trying to force that. He's actually withdrawing. He's pulling himself away from his family. He's being told to do this. And by being told, it probably was not a voice, thundering from heaven. It was probably something like you felt when you discovered this kind of thinking. If you came from a traditional background, some of what you heard here, or hear here, and by here I mean in this line of thought, maybe it was a book that you picked up, or some way you got this message, and it spoke to you in a way that nothing in your past had done. And I think this is how it usually happens with people. It's not the clouds opening up and God bellowing down, Abram, do this thing or do that thing. It's a still small voice. It's a prompting. It's an unrest, and a hearing of ideas that we respond to at a very deep level, and we know they're true. Somehow we know they're true. Maybe we can't intellectually justify them because we don't have the consciousness for it yet. We don't have the understanding of how to articulate it. We know we believe it's true, something that we're hearing is true, but we don't know how to convince anyone else. When I first discovered the book Lessons in Truth years ago, I shared it with several people, and they did not have the same reaction I had to it. To me, it was like every page was on fire. And most of the people I shared it with gave it back in a day or so and just said it was not, thanks, but no thanks. The minister I shared it with said it was the work of the devil. So he obviously didn't have the same reaction I did. But I can understand what Abram experienced. He hears something, feels something that he knows is true. And so much so that he's willing to pull out of the culture that he grew up in. And you can sort of imagine the reaction of his family to something like this. Well, think of your own family. Think of your own circle of friends if you ever bring some of these ideas up, especially if they're more of a traditional bent. They don't quite get what you're saying. It's similar to what they've heard, maybe. Maybe they like the idea of one presence, one power, but to them that's the almighty old man up in the sky kind of thing. And you might be talking about a power that's very active in you. And so you're not really communicating on the same level. It's like Ronald Iyer said in his at the end of one of his documentary, The Long Search, I think it was, which examined all the world's religions. Somebody said, "Do you still believe in God?" And he said, "You wouldn't understand my response." And they said, "Well, try me? And he said, yes. But he said, to qualify it, it's probably not the same God you're asking me if I believe in. Because my ideas have changed. My mind is opened and expanded in a new way. So Abram's having this thing, this awakening. And if you put it in the perspective of your own life, he's felt something that has made him different, that has made him see the world in a different way. Then this simple line begins to take on some meaning in our own personal lives. So that Abram in us, the metaphysical side, the spiritual side, is that movement of saying there is something deeper here. There is a reality that is closer than I've realized. As Tennyson said, nearer than hands and feet, or what is that? Near the breathing, or hands and feet. Very close. It's part of my very essence. Paul said it's in him that we live and move and have our being. And you think about that, like we're in it. We're in God. God is not something up in the sky. We're in it. And so we begin to get that, and we begin to get the feeling of our own unrest, that there's something pushing out through us. Why am I not satisfied? Why do I keep grasping for something more? I think it was Eric Butterworth that said, we desire more because we are more. And that's the whole thing I go back to on the complete soul. We're already complete. And we're awakening to that completeness. And we will not rest until we do. Because we will always know that we are more. So Abram's had this calling, and he's moving from a completely different way of thinking. From multiple gods to one God. And the Hebrews would go back and forth on this. It wasn't like, this one God idea was introduced and then they got it from then on. Because you remember what happened when Moses took the children of Israel out of Egyptian bondage, and they ended up worshiping the golden calf and went back to the polytheistic idea. And we do that all the time. We can have a church service where we start out by saying there's one presence, one power, and get into that idea. So if there's one presence and one power, where does fear come from? Where does worry come from? What is that going on in us? That's polytheism. There must be more than one power, or else I wouldn't be afraid. I have embraced that there is more than one power. So that's where it becomes very important for me to pay attention. Do I truly believe one presence and one power? Do I embrace that idea? Do I give it lip service, or do I embrace it as a truth? And what we're seeing here with Abram is he's moving to another place. He's actually fully embracing this idea. That's what it represents. He's going from a land that he grew up in to one he's never been in before. And really, that's what the spiritual awakening is. It is taking us into levels of thought and self-perception that we've never had before. I was listening to somebody talk about meditation, and it was two people that were so foul-mouthed that it was hard to listen to them talk, but they were talking about meditation, and which doesn't seem to go together at all. But everybody can meditate, and everybody can be spiritual. Everybody can, how we express ourselves is, it's kind of up for grabs. But one thing one of them said, he was quoting a meditation teacher, woman I'd never heard of, but she had observed that a lot of people approach meditation as a form of self-aggression. And I never really thought about that, but as he explained what she meant, it made perfect sense. That we go into meditation and we try to get rid of something about us that we don't like and get in touch with something that we do. It's almost like an attack on who we are. And I actually did talk about that I've talked about that in several of my books, that we don't want to condemn ourselves wherever we are. We'll close the service today with the prayer for protection that says, wherever I am, God is. And that doesn't just mean physically, it means consciously. Wherever I am in my understanding. So I don't want to get rid of something in me. I want to wake up to something in me. I don't want to be aggressive toward this self I'm trying to get rid of, trying to deny. It's like throw your arms around your entire self. And don't try to escape something. Don't try to change something. I've said that about thinking about our life in this way too. If you think of your life as a friend or a person you know, and you're saying to that friend, I'll really embrace you if you'll just change, if you'll just become more to my liking. What do you think our life, how does our life respond to that? I can't really love you yet because you're not what I want. I'm working on it. Isn't it better to say whatever it is, and I'm okay with it? And yes, it'll change. I want change to occur. But this Abram moving from one country to another, one place to another, is symbolic of us making that shift in ourselves. And stop beating ourselves up. Stop denying ourselves. Stop saying that there's part of me that's broken that needs to be fixed. I need to become more spiritualized. That's why, again, I emphasize, think of the complete soul. The soul is finished. It's complete. It's not something that has to be fixed or evolved. So this name change is kind of interesting. We go from Abram to Abraham, and not in this particular story, but later on. But it's significant, and it's important to talk about right now. Because the word Abram means high father. And Abraham means father of a multitude. It's two very different meanings. But Abram meaning high father, that is you and I grasping the idea of one presence, one power. It's us sitting in church saying it and responding positively to that. But then we go out into our life, we're confronted with something, and we have fear, we have doubts, we have worry, we have all the other powers begin to take over. So we have the high father or the high concept. It's conceptual. So the name change to Abraham, the father of the multitude, is we go from high concept to birthing of ideas, expansion of consciousness. That's what evolves, is consciousness, our understanding, our belief system. It's like I don't just mouth the words one presence and one power. I actually live my life from that basis. So we become the father of a multitude, or that idea, that truth becomes the father of a multitude. And a whole train of thinking and emotion is built around that. And we have a consciousness for it. You have the consciousness for something when you do it without even thinking about it. Like you go out and get in your car, drive home. Most of us won't think of every single thing we do driving. We'll be thinking of other things. We got a pot roast in the what's those slow cooker crock pot. I can't wait to get home. So you don't even really see where you're going. You have the consciousness for driving a car. You own it. It's yours. You're not affirming, I know how to drive this car, I know how to drive this car. You're not thinking every time you turn the wheel or you need to do all this stuff you do. It's just automatic. That's when you have the consciousness for something. You have the consciousness for one presence and one power when you're hit with some bad news and you don't react badly. you immediately get hold of yourself. And you say, I wonder what good's going to come out of this. That's when you're developing the consciousness. You've got a consciousness for it. What we do is we paste affirmations on our refrigerators and we repeat them over and over and over again, and then the bad news comes, we react just as negatively as ever. Or maybe our reaction is we say our affirmations more. We put 10 more affirmations on our refrigerator. But do we have the consciousness for it? What's the purpose of doing that? If we're not actually changing, Abram went to another place, another country. And that's what that means. Are we saying the words? Are we living among our family that believes in multiple gods? Living in a culture where we have to deny that side of ourselves because we don't want to talk about it. We're afraid to talk about it. We're afraid of the reaction of the world. Or have we moved away from that where we don't even have to think that it's part of our experience? Our consciousness is now a multitude. We don't even have to think about this. We just live from that place. And that's what we're after. And it's, it's like when you first learn to ride a bicycle, you're very conscious of doing that. Very wobbly, very unsure about everything. But most of us, after a number of years of riding a bicycle, you just jump on it. Don't think anything about it. You think about, getting on two wheels and going down the street. From one perspective, if you've never done that before, it seems like, how could you do that? You need 4 wheels or 3 at least. But you don't. You need balance. And pretty soon that whole process becomes part of your consciousness, so much so you don't even think about that when you get on it. And that's how we want our spiritual lives. And that involves 2 faculties, actually 3 faculties. I don't know why I said 2. But the faculty of elimination, Abram left all that he was comfortable with. But he apparently was growing uncomfortable with it, so he left all that was familiar, let's say that. And you have to do that too, and I have to do that too. And what is the familiar? The bad news pops up, I react in fear. That's why we don't want to do this with this church. So we're going through a valley at the moment. So do we sit here and wring our hands? And do we wonder, are we all going to die and, the church is going to go away? Or do we go to another place? And I vote for the other place. And by the other place, I mean we've come to an end, which means we've come to a beginning. Have you ever had that happen in your life? Happens all the time. We're always dying to something and being born to something else. And that's where we're at as a church. I've been here 15 years and I've seen it come to this, and every decision I have made along the way I would make again. It's brought us to this place. Is this a place of failure? I don't think so. I think it is a place of new opportunity. And we're going to get through this phase, and we're going to be something that we don't even recognize not too far down the road. We've got some thinking going on in that direction that we'll share with you at some point. But this is the way life works. We die to an old state. Abram left his home, left his country. And what was that country? It was the way things used to be. And I think that's what we're going through here as a church. The way things used to be are not the way things are now. So let's use this as a teaching example. It's a perfect thing to do. Why not use your life? So you can look at it in several ways. Was Abram failure because he left his family? His family might have thought that, because they didn't want to change. They had no interest in changing. They wanted to be the same. So they probably talked about Abram behind his back and had discussions about, what's this weird stuff he's talking about? One God, what's that? But it's a change we all go through. I went through it when I stepped into this arena of new thought. But I go through it every time I am confronted with a problem. You die to who you were at the beginning of that problem, and you are born into something else. That's the whole resurrection idea, crucifixion, resurrection. A death and a new life. So the elimination is you go from your country, you let go of the past, you let go of how you saw things. Okay, I used to respond in fear. I used to respond in wringing my hands. I used to respond in anger. So I'm going to move to another place. One presence, one power. Do I need to still do that? Or will that one presence, one power work something out in a way that is better and higher than where I am now? Do I believe it or not? That's always the question. Life will remain the same as long as we want it to in terms of what we surround ourselves with. But that unrest will not go away. We must follow that. We must respond to that like Abram did. Faith and imagination, Abram was told, I will show you a new country. He didn't see a new country. He said, I will show you a new country. So Abram acted on a promise. And he had to imagine what this new country might be like, and he apparently accepted that it would be better than where he was now. And we do the same thing. I'll believe in one presence and one power just as soon as I see the evidence. But we have this thing called imagination that's able to see the evidence before the evidence is there. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. The writer of Hebrews got that. Very profound. If you can see it, you don't need faith. So this shift in thinking to the idea of a single power at work in your life is the beginning of your spiritual success. So think of, and collectively, let's think of this church. Has the one presence and one power stopped working? I don't think so. Has change occurred? Obviously. We're coming to an end of an era. But we are moving into a new era, a new beginning, a new birth. That's the thought I want all of us to hold. I don't want anyone wringing their hands over this church. Every step we need to take, something's provided for us to take the next step. It's worked in a very beautiful, miraculous way, and there's been times it didn't look like it would. But why would we even be in business if this doesn't work? Why would we even be here? It's a big lie if it doesn't work, if it's just something to make people feel good. So we put it to the test. Like Abram, we're moving to another country. We're changing how we're thinking about this church, and we're changing how we're thinking about ourselves in whatever situation we may be in. This is spiritual leadership. We all have spiritual leadership within us. And the question always is, do I believe what I profess? Do I believe what I say I believe? Do I want to change my life by sticking with principle? Am I prepared to leave my country, to leave this place of uncertainty where it's so easy to worry and so easy to fear, to worship multiple gods? And that's basically what it is. And we all do it. It's not that I'm pointing fingers, because I'm not. But this is our opportunity. Every challenge is the opportunity. The word challenge is the opportunity, to do things differently, to respond as Abram did, to go to another place in consciousness, in awareness. When our emotions are controlled by appearances, we become subject to a multitude of secondary powers: fear, self-doubt, resentment, emotional wounds, etc. And we're all way too familiar with all those things. But those are, in a sense, secondary gods, because they take over your life. They take control of you, of your mind, of your emotions. And you know what that's like. We all do. It's misery. So when is this spiritual thing going to kick in? You take your life as it is. You accept yourself as you are. I don't have to make myself better. I'm good enough. My life is good enough. This church is good enough. We start here. And we lift up our eyes. We see things from the perspective of, yes, there is one presence, one power working through us now, opening up new opportunities, new avenues, new enthusiasm, new life. It happens in just a moment. Making the change, be open to your deepest guidance. My deepest guidance concerning this church is I'm not ready to fold the tent. And I hope you're not either. That for some reason I'm here. I've come to this place. And I've had opportunities to go elsewhere. And I didn't take them. Sometimes I wish I had. But I probably would not if I had done it. So we're here. And we've come to this place. And are we prepared to follow what we believe? To put action behind what we believe. Let go of the old. It doesn't matter where this church has been. It doesn't matter where you have been. What matters is where we are. Become mindful of your mental and emotional state. Are you responding to one power or to many? And again, as a church, I want to ask you, let's respond to one. We've been brought to this place. Be willing to take new action. And don't say, I don't know what to do. Let's all stop saying that. We don't have to know. The new action is one presence, one power working through each of us right now. And the way is opening up. All right.